This is ACOFAE. Laura Marie and Jessica Marie proudly present A Court of Fandoms and Exploration, a podcast. Fair warning, everything the hosts say is explicit, full of spoilers and adult content, and shall not be used against them. They have opinions. Let's try not to drag anyone for expressing themselves and just have fun for an hour. We all deserve it.
This week's episode contains spoilers surrounding major YA, TV, film, and book villains, including but not limited to Star Wars, Marvel and DC Comics, Buffy, Throne of Glass, and ACOTAR, with trigger warnings of violence and sexual assault. For more spoiler details, please see episode description.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to A Court of Fandoms and Exploration, your weekly deep dive into the YA literature and fandoms that we love. I'm Laura Marie.
And I'm Jessica Marie.
And today we're talking about arguably the most interesting characters in existence. We love them. We hate them. Sometimes we hate them. Sometimes we want to hate fuck them. Villains.
Please, sometimes. I said I didn't like damage, guys. But this also includes female villains because bitches get stuff done. Which also has to be something to be said. I'm sorry. It makes you think, why does it have to specify female villains? Just like when people say, oh, there's gamers and there's girl gamers. Why does it have to be gender? Like, villains are villains. But I guess we'll unpack that in this episode.
Exactly right. So I want to start off this episode with just laying out a few definitions so that it's very clear about what we're talking about. And I'll keep this relatively short and simple. So a villain, of course, we all know this, is a character who opposes the hero. They are deliberate in what they're doing. So either they're just a bad person or they're a criminal, and they're blamed for a particular evil or difficulty. And some examples of that, which we will dive into, would be Dolores Umbridge, Darth Vader, Bellatrix, Amarantha, Maeve, etc. But we will discuss examples later on. The next would be the anti-hero, which is something that I got to learn about because I wasn't exactly sure what it was. An anti-hero is a heroic character without conventional charms. They might do the right thing, but they mostly do it out of self-interest. A good example of this would be Wolverine, Rick Sanchez from Rick and Morty, Cass, Lorcan, Jude, Jack Sparrow, Deadpool, etc.
Oh, Jack Sparrow. That's interesting.
Right? It's not one that you immediately think of, but it is there. Yeah. And then we have the lesser known, but just as important, anti-villain. An anti-villain, they're not complete monsters. They are particularly hard to hate despite all of their terrible deeds. In the anti-villain's minds, they have justifiable, noble goals, and how they go about achieving those goals is what becomes a problem for the hero. So Draco, Lex Luthor, Magneto, etc. Just a quick point that I want to make about the anti-villain is they are the characters that readers want to see defeated, even though they have redeeming qualities. So you want to see them defeated, but I mean, you kind of don't. It's difficult. So to kind of contrast that, the anti-hero is a character that you root for, even though they possess less than noble qualities. Anti-heroes are the opposite of anti-villains. They are protagonists who lack the conventional attributes of traditional heroes. Quite simply, the villain is a character type and the antagonist is a plot role.
And I'm thinking about last week's episode where we were saying that within TikTok or Bookstagram or just within regular conversation, there seems to be the use of toxic and damaged used synonymously with each other. And I feel, and correct me if I'm wrong, and I guess that we'll continue to unpack that, that seems to be happening in regards to the word villain and antagonist, especially within a reading community, or not even just reading, just media consumption in general. They just seem to be used synonymously, where when you break it down the way you did, because there's still things that I didn't even realize more about the anti-hero and the anti-villain, because we are so focused on one of the two words of villain and antagonist. You don't think of the entire breakdown. It just seems that villain and antagonist are used to try to describe the same thing when clearly it's a spectrum and not just a this or that.
Yeah, and villain would be an umbrella term, and then you could, break it down in all these different points. And it's really interesting to see that the characters that fall under these different definitions that we've laid out, characters that you don't expect. Like, I never expected Wolverine. I mean, yes, he's gruff, but he's also lovable, but he also, doesn't follow orders, and he kind of does his own thing, and he has his own motivations, but he is a hero. I don't think anyone can argue that he's not, but he's not a hero in the same way that Captain America is a hero.
In the traditional sense. But then you could also bring to the conversation, vigilante can fall under there too at some point. And I think specifically with Oliver Queen in the first season of Arrow, he was kind of about self-interest because he didn't want to be the person that he used to be, but he still had to portray this person while helping other people under his own self-interest to be better than his. There's just, I feel like with the anti-heroes, there's a lot to unpack than just he's a lovable character because everybody liked a bad boy or everybody liked this person and not this. There's just the examples that I'm thinking specifically of Wolverine, Deadpool. There's just a lot more than just, oh, he's a bad guy. Or maybe not he's a bad guy, but immediate thoughts are he's not the good guy. Because usually that's so very black and white.
And when you talk about traditional villains, of course, if you Google it, which, I know that we did for this episode, the top villains are men on all of those listicles. And it's really annoying, first of all. But secondly, let's just say it up front. Men as villains are treated differently than women.
Absolutely.
And it's just important to kind of underline that period. That is the point. I think this is very obvious. When we're recording this, it is a few days after Disney just released all of their wonderful new projects. And Hayden Christensen is coming back as Darth Vader in the Obi-Wan Kenobi show. So not only does one of the baddest baddie villains ever, but he gets more of a story. He gets more of a backstory. I mean, he already has a giant backstory. He already has his redemption arc. I mean, he's already dead, but now
how many redemption arcs can one person get? And I this could easily spiral. It just goes back to the conversation that we had the other week where people were like, oh, well, Tamlin needs a redemption. Why? How many redemption arcs can a person receive? Because I don't see, if you want to flip the coin, I don't see anybody, not that what she did was right, but I don't see anybody saying, well, Amarantha should have an redemption arc. She was wronged. Her sister was wrong. She was hurt. Nobody's coming to her defense. Not that I am. She was a piece of shit. She raped Reese. She treated Feyre like crap. Everybody was her prisoner. But if you want to run with one theme for one person to have a redemption arc time and time again, why is nobody arguing that for some female villains?
And that is absolutely a fantastic point. Female villains. So when I was researching this, they all get lumped together. So when you're talking about female villains, there is not a lot of distinction between, who's an anti-hero, who's an anti-villain. You really have to dig for that kind of stuff. But one thing that everyone did agree on is that Dolores Umbridge is a villain. It's black and white. She's a villain. She's bad. She's evil. She's scary.
Why?
Because we don't know why she's doing what she's doing. So compare this to Voldemort, who we all know, and who was hot in his youth. Let's just say
Tom Riddle, what up?
Tom Riddle, what up?
Tom Riddle is totally your type. Every time you say something, I'm like, wait, how did I not make this connection for the last 16 years? Oh, wait, he is your type. Oh, yeah, he's your type too.
I have a type. Tom Riddle fits it. But when we're talking about villains, we're talking about comparing like Umbridge and Voldemort. We have not a massive backstory, but a hefty backstory about how Tom Riddle became Voldemort and why he's doing what he's doing. It's messed up, but it's there. We have nothing about Dolores Umbridge.
And I don't want to argue, but I just want to bring up the point. And believe me, I hated Umbridge with the rest of them. And it's so sad for somebody who loves pink. I want to like her, but she was a woman. She was terrifying and she was in a position of power. So are we aside from how she treated the students, is it that she was a woman in a position of power, which made her terrifying? We don't know why she's terrifying. We just know that she is, but why?
That's a good point. I would also say that a man in that position would also be terrifying.
But it would be acceptable. And that's exactly, I mean, I want to kind of dive into it a little bit later in regarding Taylor Swift, because I just went on a whole, again, Evermore came out this week. And meanwhile, I just listened to Folklore for the first time. And I went through a deep dive because of how she's portrayed in the media. She is painted as the villain. Maybe we won't just get to it later. Maybe we'll talk about it now. She is painted as the villain. And like you said, if it was a man in the role, he would be terrifying, but it would be acceptable, which is exactly what she says in her lyrics of The Man, where she's like, I could do this, I could do this, I could do this. It would be fine. But if I was a woman, you'd be saying the opposite. You would not be accepting of the things that she's saying. And I thought it was really important because she had an interview with CBS and she goes, there's a different vocabulary for men and women. A man does something, it's strategic, and a woman does the same thing, it's calculating. A man is allowed to react and a woman is allowed to overreact. And I think that's important to say because even when she's talking about she in the Miss Americana documentary, she's even from a media point of view or like an artist point of view. She goes, female artists have to reinvent themselves 20 times more than a male artist can just keep longevity with their career without reinventing themselves. And if women don't, they're out of a job. They have to constantly be this shiny new object with some sort of backstory, but nobody wants to know the backstory. It's all about how they're being portrayed visually.
That's a good point and something that I have never considered. Damn.
Yeah, it was honestly, I have a very contentious relationship with myself regarding my opinions of Taylor Swift. I hate her. I love her. I want to hate her. I have this crazy amount of respect for her team, her management team, her branding team, her marketing, PR, like everything. I really do respect her. And I kind of felt guilty when she's saying that, even just the different vocabulary, because I, as a woman, I feel guilty that I was like, oh, it does seem very calculating. It does seem very manipulative, but I've never said that about male artists or male in the industry. And that was a moment that I had to be reflective of myself and my growth and wanting to do better as a woman to support other people in this industry. It's easy to vilify others in media when it's a woman. So it becomes a whole why of it. Like, why do we feel so comfortable? And that's just a bigger conversation to have, and to have those uncomfortable discussions, even within yourself, why the uncertainty.
Tell me, you're talking about Taylor. Tell me about Taylor Swift and Kanye.
Here's just like an overview. Back in 2009, she had the VMAs. He went up on stage, completely embarrassed her, saying Beyonce was the best album of all time. I agree.
Yeah, we stand Beyonce.
I do not like Beyonce. He was not wrong. Laura loves Beyonce the way I love Lady Gaga. We have stand. We love it. The strong women, queens. We will join and have joined the cults, the appropriate cults. That being said, even like from that 2009 segment, Kanye was supposed to have a tour with Gaga. I still did not agree with what Kanye did. I agreed with what he said. I did not agree with what he did. I refused to go purchase tickets for Lady Gaga's concert because she was supposed to go on tour with Kanye, and I refused to go. I was like, that is not how you treat people in the industry. You shouldn't treat people in the industry. Then you flash forward to whatever it was, 2016, 2017, where they've apparently had some bridge in their relationship. He's going to call her a bitch in one of her songs. And she's like, yeah, that's cool. And then she goes and says, I want to remove myself from this narrative, whatever the words were, acting like she had no idea this was going to happen. And then Kim was like, I have this whole recording of your conversation with my husband. And I'm guilty. I was part of the Taylor Swift is canceled. It looks bad. From an optic standpoint, it looks bad. and the media eviscerated her. I mean, completely vilified her. But when I feel like not until recently, and I can't even say this, tables have turned. She's gotten back. And again, this goes to like optics and marketing. I went to the Reputation tour. Absolutely loved that Reputation came out after this whole Taylor Swift is canceled. She built on that. She had this moving stage, this square moving stage that completely was shade to Kanye. I don't care what anybody says, from his square moving stage. And that was before I became, like I said, like I have a very contentious relationship with myself regarding her, but I just respected the hell out of that shade. Like, yes, bitch, you take ownership, flip the tables, because nobody expects it. And the only people who do expect it are her fans. And there's nothing. I just have respect for somebody who can just grab life by the balls like that and just run with it.
This is the tour with the snake, right? Where she had like a snake throne.
And she's like, you know what? You want to say I'm a snake? I'm going to lean into it. I'm going to lean into this villain that you all are portraying me as. Like, you want me to be I will not just be a snake. I will be the serpent queen. Like, I thought it was so smart. And it was probably that tour that made me a fan. I went, the whole background with that. But one of the nights that I went, I wasn't going to go with the original person I was going with, but I was just sitting on tickets, and I went with Sabrina. And that was like, to go with a fan who had that passion. I couldn't have, that was probably to share that experience for somebody. She couldn't afford it. The tickets were just going to sit there. I was like, let's go. I pulled a Laura, and I was just like, you know what, let me share with the people I care about. And it changed the whole, how I saw everything, because I got to have fun. I got to appreciate it. I got to respect it. And that's probably where I started to be like, okay, I could like her, but I'll only like her. I'll closet like her right now. And now I'm definitely a bit more open about it, clearly. This isn't supposed to be a Taylor Swift podcast. But if we want to talk about villains in the media and where we are now too, you could also lean into Miranda Priestley in The Devil Wears Prada. She's completely vilified. She's awful. She's this. She's demanding. She's assertive. Use those same words to describe a man in a powerful position. Nobody would say that they were the villain.
And if you're going to talk about Miranda Priestley as a villain, you have to talk about the real villains in that movie.
The friends, the quote unquote friends, because those friends aren't friends. And same with the boyfriend. And the boyfriend, why I even, maybe just thinking about it now, the boyfriend, maybe he wasn't a villain. He just wasn't her match. That is not the person that she needed.
Yeah.
But the friends were shit.
Yeah, I know the friends were terrible.
Your friends are the ones who should be acceptable throughout everything. I'm not like your romantic relationships, they come and go. You're still learning, but your friends are like essentially the people at your core who know you. And to just be assholes. They want to accept the Marc Jacobs, but they want to hate on her for her work ethic. And it wasn't even a year. All she had to do is hustle for a year. That's all I did my first year when I left my one job, and then I went straight into entertainment. Nothing else mattered. Like, it was just my career, and everybody was acceptable for it, because why wouldn't you be? We're supposed to be supporting each other. What shitty friends. People have lives. I can't be up your ass 24/7.
Preach it. I think this is a good transition from talking about media to talking about how, just this one example that I'm going to give, and how she has been made into a villain, but she's not actually. And of course, I'm talking about Poison Ivy.
Okay.
I'm talking about Poison Ivy. She is a main character in the new Harley Quinn cartoon that is on HBO Max. It's fantastic. Go watch it. Everyone's having so much fun. It's just amazing. It is adult with a capital A. So watch your asses there. But Poison Ivy makes it very, very clear several times throughout the 2 seasons that I've seen that she is not a villain. She's an environmental activist. And the reason that she's doing what she's doing is because, the governments and the corporations are destroying the planet. and she has plant powers. So she's going to use the plant powers to try to make the world a better place. And if it takes violence to do that, then whatever, because nothing else has worked. And the optics around that are, oh, she's a supervillain and she's doing all of this horrible thing. She's harming the city, whatever. But
I feel like you can argue that, because even if you go, you don't even have to go that far back. This summer, this year, where people had to, were being vocal with our government, and we still have to, about the changes that you don't like seeing with the government, or the lack thereof, really, where sometimes people do have to be vocal. And of course, people are going to have opinions like, oh, that's not how you go about doing things. I go, okay, well, how about you give me a suggestion, because nothing else has been working to get your attention. And then when you put the question back on somebody else, that, oh, I don't know, but that's just not it. Who are you to decide how people begin to listen? Because everything else, when you do it, quote unquote, peacefully, it wasn't happening. So now that it's organized, now that it's structured, that's the issue. Come on.
And Poison Ivy does say if people would work towards fixing the environment, if, governments and world leaders came together to fix the environment, she wouldn't do what she's doing. But she's the one that has the ability to make some sort of change. So she's not going to sit around and not do anything. And I think that's very important, because when you look up, top DC villains, she's on the list. And I just
Harley Quinn, Poison Ivy, Catwoman.
Right. Yeah.
Three right there.
Yeah. And Harley Quinn, I mean, I love Margot Robbie. She's a goddess. Talk about being villainized in the press, in the media. The hate that Birds of Prey got from fanboys was ridiculous. I just watched it. It's not bad. It's pretty good. There's pacing issues, whatever, but of course she's fantastic. And the rallying of the women, it's just wonderful to see. The hair tie scene, the fights, they're great. People shat on that movie, a lot of men, for no reason.
It's interesting. And you know what? And not that they're villains. It's a whole different situation. But I think of the whole female segment in Endgame, when they're the reason that like Peter was saved. I feel like I don't care how much of a feminist any male is, they will never understand what it feels like to see something like that on screen. And even if you want to apply it to Birds of Prey, men will never understand what it's like to see pivotal, predominantly female, heavy casting in such huge roles in the media. They will never know that feeling, whether you like it or not. There's always going to be opinions about stuff. Here we are sharing ours on a podcast, but it's such a deeper feeling, regardless if it's the hero, the anti-hero, the villain. There's something more. And I haven't seen Birds of Prey yet.
So Harley Quinn, I think, is a really fantastic example and a good jumping off point for kind of the next section of the podcast, which is Harley Quinn in the cartoon and in the movies, and more or less in the comics, but I'm not going to even pretend to be an expert on the comics. She is dumping the Joker and kind of striking out on her own. And that is the premise of the cartoon. And obviously that is what's happening in Birds of Prey. And she is labeled a villain, but we love her. We root for her. We want to see her dump this incredibly toxic in every single way man.
So is she really the villain, or is she the anti-villain? What was the difference again? The anti-villain? Anti-hero? Anti-hero.
Yeah, I would say that she's an anti-hero. Some would say that she's an anti-villain, but we don't want to see Harley fail.
No.
We want to see her succeed. So if we're using that as the baseline, then she would be an anti-hero. We want to see her succeed in everything that she does. And she has a very strong relationship with Poison Ivy, and the two of them, are really good friends. And also Harley is really desperate for the validation of the Legion of Doom, which is all of the male supervillains,
Mm,
and she
right.
gets in to the Legion of Doom, but then she realizes that they're all a bunch of assholes and she doesn't need them.
Good for her.
Right?
Fucking boys club.
Yeah, and she's
I'll start
she's
my own
stronger.
club, bitches.
Yeah. That's what she did. She has her own crew. She's got Ivy. She's got a bunch of people. Like, she's doing good. I think that's really important and is kind of where I want to go with male villains versus female villains, redemption arcs, and pairings.
I was thinking of Catwoman.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that makes sense. I know we've discussed this about Catwoman is obviously stealing from the rich, giving back to who needs it. But how come she's a villain and Robin Hood is not? Robin Hood's doing the same thing. Disney made a whole fucking movie about him. Like
Robin Hood Fox.
Oh,
I think everyone had a crush on Robin Hood Fox, which is a weird thing to say.
yeah, maybe that is a weird thing. It's not a weird thing to say because it makes sense. Like who he could get it.
Yeah, it's like wait, Robin Hood Fox, but
Wait, Robin Hood Fox. But you know who else? Oh, I can't think of who's the guy who played Robin Hood in the Mel Brooks Robin Hood Men in Tights.
Cary Elwes.
Yes, he's so hot.
We love him.
We love him. Oh yeah, because obviously he was in The Princess Bride. I guess just Robin Hood in general could get it, but
That's a good point. Another point that I want to make with Catwoman is that when I was doing a little bit of research in her, she was created solely as a love interest for Batman.
Why are people consistently being created? I mean, women in general are used as things and objects, and that's how they're portrayed. But it always can only be for the sole interest of a man.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was why she was created. She was a cat. She was, I think the phrasing was unknowable as a cat, just like women are unknowable to men. And, she's sleek and she's athletic and bendy. I think the word that was used.
I guess the feline characteristics, because what are you going to say? Dog woman?
Yeah, I mean, that wouldn't really work.
I don't even want to go. That's an easy spiral right there.
So you have a really good point. Like, Catwoman is a jewel thief. She does bad things. She steals, but she consistently teams up with Batman and his extended family, if you want to call them that, and they do good things. So she is obviously not strictly a villain. I think there's a lot of women in kind of the DC universe that aren't one or the other. I would say Batgirl is a hero in, whatever, but
I guess you can, if you want to go with the definition, like we were saying, like to do out of self-interest, it leans into the I'm helping you because because it benefits me, not because it's this altruistic thing.
Right. So let's move to male-female pairings of villains.
Okay.
So we have my favorite, which is Spike and Drusilla from Buffy.
Oh.
We've got some other ones. We've got Hazel and Cha-Cha from Umbrella Academy. And of course, the most famous probably is Jaime and Cersei from Game of Thrones.
Okay.
So if we're looking at these villain pairings, the thing that will stand out if you look for it is this. They start off equally bad, or you could say evil. And then something happens, usually the love of a good woman, and the male villain has his redemption arc because of the love of a good woman. And the female in the pair becomes even worse as a villain. She doubles down on her evil. This is very clear with Jaime and Cersei. She doubles down on her evil and does not get a redemption arc. She dies a villain, where the counterpart not only gets the love of a good woman, but has a whole journey about how he's better as a person.
I'm changed.
Yes, it's changed.
Do you think that comes from, you always hear just when you hear women wanting to change a guy and being the girl that changes.
You want to fix him?
Yeah, the fixers. Do you think that's part of where the portrayal might come from?
I have no idea. I honestly have no idea. And I think that kind of, merits further research, because I did not realize this until it was pointed out in one of the articles that I read. I was like, oh my God, why? Why is this happening? Why do the men, and then this just goes on to our next topic of why do the men get the redemption arcs and the women don't? And I think we could speak to so many examples, but I know that you were just watching Ragnarok, so you have a little bit of insight into Hela.
Yes. And that was the other thing. I mean, I might not be able to explain it as well as you will, but one of the questions that I had was how Odin gave her away or something. She was just becoming more powerful. It was just a how of it all, of how come, again, here is a woman who is powerful, who was driven, who was ambitious, who wanted to kind of continue with what the goal was, and all of a sudden that was feared? That doesn't make sense to me.
You're not wrong. That was her purpose. She is literally the goddess of.
Right.
That is what she does. Yeah. And then she was staying the course. And then I feel like Odin lost his nerve, and he was just over the constant war and struggle, and then just locked her away. Not just that, but completely erased her from everything. Erased her from the mosaics and stuff in Asgard, and Thor and Loki didn't even know about her.
I had no idea. She was the firstborn. She was the eldest.
Yeah. Completely ridiculous. And she is one of my favorite villains. She's fantastic. Part of that is probably Cate Blanchett just having so much fun.
Queen.
Oh my God, she's so good. And just the helmet and the swagger and the outfit and just the principles. She's like, screw you guys. I'm the heir. I'm the firstborn. I'm going to take over.
I feel like everybody forgets she was worthy. There's nothing to say that she wasn't worthy, because why wouldn't she be worthy? She did what she was supposed to do. There was nothing intrinsically bad about her. She developed this, I don't want to say ferocity, but frustration, resentment. She developed a resentment because wouldn't you if you were just kind of sequestered by yourself forever? That just happens. That's natural. You can't just sing Kumbaya for however many hundreds, thousands of years that she was away. That never made her not worthy of the hammer. And that I don't think anybody realizes that or discusses that. And maybe I'm completely out of my realm to have that discussion because I'm not familiar with the Thor comics.
That's a really good point. I think Ragnarok is criminally underrated. It is my favorite Marvel movie, but she does completely own it. And she was just doing what she was supposed to do, and she is the villain in that movie. That's what it is, which is really interesting because you've got Loki in there, and we as a society love him.
I was going to say, let's, again, because Investor Day was the other day, you want to talk about villains? He got his own fucking show. And if you saw the trailer, you already are diving into, oh, he's a villain. And maybe we're not using that word correctly either. This is still growing pains for us to understand the anti-hero and the anti-villain and the villain. But he has his own, at the end of the day, he has his own show. We as a society love him. I don't see the appeal. Visually, he's not my type. He's your type.
My type. He's my type. There he is again.
But here he has a whole storyline. I don't want to say crazy, but it's just another example. Now you have Hayden Christensen coming back for Darth Vader. You have Loki. You have whatever else is going to be within those shows.
Because we already have his backstory.
We know his backstory.
We already know this. We already know, I would say that he's an anti-villain. We already know that he is bad and that he does things for his own devices. And then now we're getting more.
And we're still rooting for him. Everything is based out of self-interest, and you still want him to succeed. Even in Endgame, when he was just like, I'm taking that Tesseract and I'm splitting out again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, again.
Because can't you... Isn't it an Infinity War where you could say his redemption arc was him sacrificing himself to not give up the Tesseract, and then it was Thor who goes fine, or however that dynamic played out. Either way, before the Tesseract, later on with the time traveling and everything, Loki had his redemption arc of giving up his life.
Sure. Oh, and that is right into the other super sexy villain, Kylo Ren.
You take the reins on this one, lady.
Kylo Ren.
Who's also Laura's type.
To be fair, Adam Driver is my type. Any, 6'4", giant hands, dark hair.
Built like a fridge.
Built like a refrigerator. Makes everything small. So let me preface this by saying that early on in the pandemic on my TikTok, I got into Kylo talk, and it was very explicit with what was going on there. It's kind of died down a little bit because things, come and go. But
or have you just not been interacting with the Kylo talk as much?
Yeah, that's probably part of it, but I digress. Kylo Ren is sexy as hell. I'm going to put that out there. It is what it is. He is a damaged teenage emo boy, and that is my type. He gets a background. He gets a redemption arc, and he made such of an impact in just those 3 movies that he was in that people are desperate for more of him.
Right.
And they're desperate for more of him as Ben Solo, and they're desperate just for more Kylo stuff. It doesn't even matter what version you get. People just want more of.
I could see, this isn't necessarily on the topic, but I saw a TikTok the other day where somebody was saying that they should have let Rey die to continue, or to give Kylo a redemption arc to continue on, not necessarily as Kylo, but as Ben Solo. And as I saw it while we were prepping for this episode, and it made me think, and yet again, here is another case that people are gunning for another redemption arc for a male villain. Not to say that things can't be done with Kylo. You could have a whole prequel, or while this was going on during these 3 movies that he was in, you can have a whole other behind the scenes. While this is happening, he was doing this. He could just literally live off this salary and just keep doing the movie. There's so many storylines.
This is a little off topic, but I was talking to our editor, Sam, about this, and we were talking about how the Star Wars prequels were so shat on when they came out by the older fanboy generation.
Is that the Phantom Menace ones?
Yeah, those are the Natalie Portman, Hayden Christensen ones. So those were shat on so bad by the Star Wars fans, and the older ones or whatever. And they're not great, but the kids that saw them when they were 8, 9 years old, they've grown up now. So that is the Star Wars that they grew up with.
They would have seen those ones first, if anything, before the ones from the 70s.
Right. So they're nostalgic for those. And there's been a huge resurgence on TikTok of Obi and everything going on with that.
Which actually makes a whole lot more sense, putting that nostalgia together and the resurgence of the demographic that grew up with it. Why we have the storylines that are happening. Oh, that was fucking Disney. You are brilliant.
Right. So because Gen Z is nostalgic for Ewan McGregor and Hayden Christensen, we're getting more of them, which, is excellent and everything.
I wonder if they'll CGI their faces to make them look younger, like they did for Samuel L. Jackson in Captain Marvel. They CGI'd his face. It was still him, but they made him less aged because it had to be portrayed in the early 90s and not the Nick Fury we have now.
Well, Hayden will be in the helmet, so it won't matter for him.
It won't matter for him.
Right. But yeah, Ewan's old as fuck now, so I don't know. I don't know how they're going to do that.
I have no idea.
Just think about that. We're getting Loki show, we're getting Darth Vader is going to be a huge part of it. And
you could even we're also getting Hawkeye, and let's not forget he has his redemption arc. But how come, again, we can argue in Endgame when his whole family was snapped away, he went on a killing spree, but they don't want they don't hold him accountable, but they don't consider him an assassin. But with Black Widow, she's an assassin, she's killed all these people, blah blah blah, but nobody shits on Hawkeye for doing it for a year, and
she's so guilty about it that she sacrifices herself. Come on now. Why does Scarlett Johansson?
Why did Scarlett have to die.
There's like no reason.
I feel like, I don't know. Again, I'm going to say it's probably something that's, I'm not a Hawkeye fan. Maybe it's because I was such an Oliver Queen Arrow fan. But I like Black Widow. I think, okay, let's take Arrow out of it. Black Widow is a more compelling character than Hawkeye.
Oh, absolutely. You could say that about any villain, anti-hero, anti-villain in general.
But am I skewed because, and this is just like me asking questions to the void, am I saying that because I'm a female? Is it a female perspective? I don't think so. I feel like you can factually back it up and write it down on paper.
Well, sure. I mean, here's a really good example. Superman is boring as hell.
Don't tell that to the fanboys.
He's the most boring superhero that I can think of. I mean, Captain America is really white bread, but he's not as boring as Superman.
I love me some Captain America.
But you can't say that he's not just some white bread morals, got his code, sticks to it, good person.
That's why I'm boring. I've had to grow from it. Aesthetically, though, like that's still kind of on time.
So, and then you go the other way and say, well, Batman,
but I will fight for Batman. And I say this, and I will also say it with Oliver Queen too. Yeah, people are like, oh, they're just billionaire playboys. Whatever you want to say, they don't have any powers. It is strictly mental. They don't bring anything to the table except their intellect and physical skill set. There is no additional specialty there. And you could say the same thing with Black Widow. She doesn't have any powers. She is highly skilled and trained in what she brings to the table. And you could say that about Batman too.
You could. And if we're going to go, discussing people that have no powers, let's talk about someone who I think is overlooked when you're talking about villains and specifically female villains. But if you want to talk about someone that is just pure evil, Cruella de Vil.
I mean, I can't even argue against that. You're skinning puppies.
You're skinning puppies. Yeah. But again, very bad, doing very bad things. No backstory. We don't know why she's like this. We don't know what happened to her.
Which will be interesting to see if that's even explained in the Cruella live action.
Exactly.
We don't know much about it except Emma Stone's portraying Cruella de Vil in the 80s.
Right. I bring this up because I know that you wanted to talk about Maleficent.
Yes. Specifically the live action Maleficent. Because I know in the first one, she's basically wronged by King Stefan. And that already bothers me because there is such a conversation, the way female villains are portrayed, that they become evil because of the being at the hands of a man and being heartbroken and being destroyed, and that automatically will make you evil, which it kind of wraps into Moana when the green goddess isn't the goddess that she is. She's, they just know her as like this angry lava thing.
Te
Fiti. I've only seen it once just because I don't feel like crying like that again right now. So I know how I got with that movie. I don't want to do it again.
Jess came to visit me in Germany and I told her she had to watch this movie and she did not know why. And I told her it would change her life and she cried through most of it.
I cried through most of it, and our editor walked in on me crying on their couch. And he just walked in, he walked out and went back for his run. And if you have seen Moana, it's not like your typical end of the movie, you don't cry till the end of the Disney movie. You cry right out the gate. Like 20 minutes in, you're already crying. It's not supposed to hit. And, again, there was different lived experiences that were going on then. And then you process it. And then, you realize that it is yourself. You have to be true to yourself. And I'm just so frustrated with how there is a consistent portrayal. The only way women are upset or vilified is at the hands of a man.
Literally, the plot for that movie is someone stole her heart and made her into an angry, like PMSy fire monster breathing bitch. And then a man helps It's kind of better a man helps a female give the heart back.
But I feel like Moana helped her more than a man.
Yeah, for real.
Like, to be like, look, you don't have to be angry. Like, we can do this together.
Right.
Remember who you are as a person. You aren't this angry bitch. And I feel like, not to go off topic, but that happens a lot in, you know, if you're in a tumultuous relationship, especially if you're gaslighting towards the end. And I can recognize that in myself. I was talking to somebody about it the other day. I go, at the end of one of my relationships, that was the worst version of myself. I can look back and I don't recognize that person, but I can recognize that I was just that hurt and looking for any type of emotional response. But that doesn't mean that's who I am at my core or who I was at my core. It was an innate emotional response to what I was going through at that time. And I feel like that's applicable with Moana. You aren't this person. You aren't this angry, PMS-y, over-emotional. Like, don't let it eat at you. And I think that's a constant theme that you see in villains, not just characters, in villains like Maleficent.
I am not familiar with her portrayal in the movies, although I love Angelina Jolie. She's gorgeous.
I like the second one better. I mean, granted, I kind of remember the first one, but I just know the second one much better because how many times I had to watch it. And even then, she's just kind of, she's doing what she needs to do for her daughter. And she is a good example of, I felt like there was a redemption arc. One of two redemption arcs I've seen. And the other one, you know, the other one that immediately comes to mind is Regina in Once Upon a Time, where the evil queen has a redemption arc, but at what cost? And it is at the cost of Robin, of the person that she loves.
Her true love.
Her true love.
Man, that's messed up.
Why can't, why can't you have it all? There's my other question. Why can't we have it all?
Men have it all. Men get it all the time.
Yep.
It's not even remotely fair.
It's not even, but also not only is it not only fair, it's not even questioned. If you think about the work environment, no matter your profession, it is typically man can have the corner office, be the CEO, have a wife. Not only can he have it, he's expected to have it. So, I mean, that's its own conversation if you want to go about like male insecurities and the pressures of being a man, blah, blah, blah. If we want to dive down that road, we can. However, not only can they have it, they're expected to have it. And it's okay. However, flip it, it's typically portrayed that women can't have it all. How are you going to balance it? How are you going to multitask? Can you realistically take time? Everything's questioned. If you want a career, you can't have a family. If you want a family, you can't have a career. And it's also reflected in pay.
Preach it. Preach it. I want to bring up one more Disney female villain. Actually, two. I want to bring up two. One is Yzma.
I've never seen that movie.
Oh my God.
Giving me a really good example the other day. Although I saw a really good TikTok. It was Yzma and whoever the big guy is.
Kronk.
And they were like on a roller coaster. But whoever did the edit, they had Kronk as Cassian and Yzma as Nesta. And it was so and Kronk is like, yeah. And Yzma was just not having. I can't wait for Silver Flames. I've convinced myself that all these memes and TikToks and everything, this is what's been happening. Like, this alternate universe is what's been happening while we've been waiting for Silver Flames.
We can only hope. Hope.
Like all of that, every time I see something good, I'm like, canon. That's actually happening as we speak.
So Yzma, I really love Yzma. The Emperor's New Groove is absolutely fantastic, but she is a really good example of being villainized for having ambition. Cusco, David Spade, is a shitty
He's
emperor.
The llama, right?
Yes, he gets turned into the llama. She actually turns him into a llama.
Cool, he probably deserved it.
Well, yeah, she was trying to kill him, but it was an accident because Kronk is dumb and he mixed up the poisons. But I mean, it's just hilarious.
See, Cassian.
You would. All Yzma wants to do is rule the empire. That's all she wants to do.
Same.
Stand a queen. I mean, she's not like super, aware of the peasants' struggle and all of that. But to be fair, Cusco doesn't give a damn either. He is awful in every single way. And she's the villain. You know, she's obviously defeated.
So she's the villain because she wants power?
Well, that's the thing. She's the villain because the way that the movie is, you are rooting for David Spade as Cusco to go through his redemption arc because he's funny, he's charismatic.
But why do we want him to have a redemption arc? Why are we not having Yzma to have a redemption arc?
Oh, that's the whole
I've never seen the movie, so there's like these are actual questions. I'm like, wait, that doesn't make sense. How come if they're exactly the same, how come it's okay for us to root for him, but we don't? Why are we not rooting for Yzma this whole time?
That's the question, because she's so good. She's so like, she's just as funny as he is. She has more ambition. She's, more committed to the Empire. And Cusco, the whole thing is Cusco wants to build a summer water park house situation on top.
Zachary Levi.
Yeah, on top of John Goodman. I'm pretty sure it's John Goodman. On top of his village, and just wipe out this whole village so that he can build a summer house. And that's like the whole plot. And then, yeah. But anyway, Yzma is a really good example of being villainized for kind of no reason. And I just want to throw that out there.
I mean, all good points. I like them. And I mean, obviously we're having the conversation because here I am just like throwing questions out there and you're like, no, that is the question. We're all just sitting here. That's the whole point of this episode.
The other villain that I want to talk about is one that Jesse and I talked about when we were prepping for this episode. It is Ursula. Our editor, Sam, wanted to make sure that we talked about Ursula too, because he made a good point about her.
Oh, I like the point that he made the other day. Yeah, talk about that.
So Ursula, Sea Witch, has a tiny bit of a backstory, tiny bit. Is Ursula evil? And that's like the overarching theme. And you could say yes, and you could say no, and you can say maybe. But here's the thing with Ursula. Ursula has Ariel sign a contract, and Ariel signs this contract, right?
As a minor to human standards.
Yes. And Ariel goes up and she does what she's supposed to do, and she does not accomplish the task by the allotted contract days, and she reverts back into a mermaid.
She signed the contract. Makes sense.
She signed the contract. It was there. Like it's all very much spelled out for her. Is Ursula a villain? Well, Ursula does turn into Vanessa to try to actively thwart Ariel's efforts to win the prince, and that's not great.
Fun fact, did you know that Jodie Benson voices Vanessa also?
Huh.
I learned that through TikTok. Thank you, TikTok.
Thank you, TikTok.
So she does Ariel's voice and singing voice and Vanessa's singing voice. So when Vanessa's in the dressing room, have that little mermaid. Like, I love it. I love the sass.
So, yeah, Ursula has her sign the contract, and then she doesn't fulfill the contract, and Ariel gets turned back into a mermaid, whatever. And then Ursula goes off and becomes very big and, swirls the seas with her trident and everything. So she's pretty evil, but is what she's doing. So she knows what happens when people don't fulfill their contracts. They turn into those little sea creatures, and she collects them in her sea cave, and she delights in having them there.
She delights in other people's pain.
Right. So she's a villain. It's not great. So our editor Sam was saying, well, she's like she's like a debt collector. She's like a loan shark. So are those people evil? And that is a really interesting point, because yes, because they know what they're doing is going to cause harm to the people that they're doing it to.
Especially from a debt collector, you think, obviously, if you got to that point, it wasn't electively.
Right.
Nobody wants to be sought after for money.
Right. Like no one ever.
But on the other flip side of it, you're taking out money, or however you're taking out this contract. You're not fulfilling a contract. You understand that there are repercussions if your side of the contract is not filled.
Right. It's like informed consent. Like you know what's going to happen if you don't fulfill it. So it's just something very interesting. And the point was, if Ursula was a man, would it have been so compelling, for one? And would she have been so evil? Because men are usually the ones that are the loan sharks and the debt collectors. You don't see women in that role a lot.
I immediately thought of Hades from Hercules.
There you go, right? Like,
and I love Hades.
Hades is beloved.
I love him. I cannot wait. I mean, I really hope Disney does it well with the live action. But he's one of my favorite Disney villains. And he's compelling, he's funny, he's charming, and he's doing the same exact thing. He's collecting on a debt.
Boom. There you go. Point made.
Holy shit.
Yeah, and we love him. I mean, and people, I really love Ursula. I think she has her fantastic like musical numbers and her, her solo, and
absolutely.
She's fantastic, but she is not Hades.
Why do we hate her? Do we hate her because she's collecting on the debt, or do we hate her because she took it a step further and she's like, not only am I going to collect on your debt, I'm also just going to show you that I can take your man. If she just collected on the debt and said, look, too bad, so sad, now you're a seaweed with me, that would we have wiped our hands of it.
And that, I think that just goes to the point that we've been making this whole episode, is a woman took it too far in society's standards.
Society's standards.
Yeah. And now she is, you could say like that's why she got so big, right? Like
I emotionally eat too. I'm sorry.
Right. Like it's just, there's just there's a whole thing there. Just, I don't know. Those are all the main points that I wanted to make. How are you on your points?
I mean, I feel like we've kind of interweaved everything, and I love this discussion. I love this dialogue, I feel, and including when I just started, Throne of Glass this week. So
Woo-hoo!
There will be, I know you're so excited. I think there's going to be more to unpack, more to bring to the table. And this is obviously because of our podcast. It's not one thing or the other. It's exploring themes, exploring different fandoms. There's going to just be consistently more to unpack. Just, the more that we're exposed to in general, more books are coming out, television shows are coming out. Finally, we're able to see some things, whether it's streaming or what have you, that we'll be able to continue to dive into this conversation, if not in an additional whole other episode, but integrated in the conversation that we're having, not just with each other, but there's something to be said about, other people bringing in their perspectives of saying like, oh, but what, you two talking about this makes me think of this other example, and I like the spiral that comes out of the conversation, because it is a reoccurring theme, as we've clearly said throughout this whole episode, whether it's in television or movies or books or in every aspect, it's applicable in how you dissect it. It's not just black or white. There's this whole gray spectrum that we're talking about, and it just stimulates the conversation.
I just want to ask you 2 questions before we wrap up.
Oh, Lord.
Where would you put Jude in our definitions?
I'm looking back at our definitions. We're going with, she's not a villain. I'll do process of elimination. She's not a villain. I would maybe say anti-villain. I'm thinking about, unlike their evil counterparts, she's not a monster. I don't hate her. She's somewhere between anti-hero and anti-villain. You have her under anti-hero, and she's definitely about self-serving. I think that's what makes me think of her more anti-hero than anti-villain. But she's a mix, because even anti-villain, in the character's mind, their goals are justifiable. It's justifiable and noble, which is exactly what happens in the first book, when she has to lock down Cardin. She needs to have that year and a day. The more I think about it, and I've only read through the series once, and I can't wait to reread it and have a whole discussion about it. She's more compelling the more I think about her. I was already really excited. You've seen, my reaction videos. So that'll be a fun thing to discuss and to unpack, because there's a lot there.
And I just want to make the point that we understand that there is another category, the morally gray category. And we will have an episode dedicated to the morally gray characters and everything that goes with that. I think the most famous morally gray character in the book, the YA book talk community, would be Kaz Brecker from Six of Crows. And we know that that is going to be a Netflix series. It's casted, they're filming it. So look for that episode to come out when we get kind of a firm schedule and like date situation on the premiere of Six of Crows, because he's the ultimate one. And we will dive into all of that. I think that about does it for us for this week. Join us next week when we will be talking about the gold standard of A Court of Mist and Fury, ACOMAF for the fandom.
The best book.
It is. It is Jess's favorite book. It is my favorite book. It is just the gold standard for everything. And
I can't stop smiling. That's going to be so exciting and emotionally draining. I don't know how I'm going to prepare.
It will be a good one. So make sure to tune in. We will be witnessing, in that book, you witness Reese's full redemption arc. Our favorite, he's not a villain. What is he?
I mean, this episode kind of jumps into that. Like, it kind of just sets up for that next episode of his redemption arc. Is he morally gray? There's a lot of things to unfold. We already know that he's damaged. Some can argue that he's toxic. There's a lot to unpack with my favorite, Illyrian.
Well, I guess my favorite High Lord, my second favorite, Illyrian.
But we'll also be able to talk about the difference between just like the red flags. And I think we were talking about that earlier, which we'll dive deeper into eventually when we get to that episode as well, of things that hindsight's always 20/20, right? So that's its own discussion. So have fun listening to our episode. Looking forward to our ACOMAF episode. Find us on Instagram, ACOFAE Podcast, ACOFAE. We look forward to more discussions and just engaging with everyone. This has been super fun.
Thanks for listening. See you next week. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.